Candide by Voltaire. Chapter 21. Candide and Martin, reasoning, draw near the coast of France. At length they descried the coast of France. "Were you ever in France, Mr. Martin?" said Candide. "Yes," said Martin. "I have been in several provinces. In some, one half of the people are fools. In others, they are too cunning. In some, they are weak and simple. In others, they affect to be witty. In all, the principal occupation is love. The next is slander. And the third is talking nonsense." "But, Mr. Martin, have you seen Paris?" "Yes, I have. All these kinds are found there. It is a chaos, a confused multitude where everybody seeks pleasure and scarcely anyone finds it, at least as it appeared to me. I made a short stay there. On my arrival, I was robbed of all I had by pickpockets at the fair of Saint-Germain. I myself was taken for a robber and was imprisoned for 8 days, after which I served as corrector of the press to gain the money necessary for my return to Holland on foot. I knew the whole scribbling rabble, the party rabble, the fanatic rabble. It is said that there are very polite people in that city, and I wish to believe it. For my part, I have no curiosity to see France," said Candide. "You may easily imagine that after spending a month at El Dorado, I can desire to behold nothing upon earth but Miss Cunegonde. I go to await her at Venice. We shall pass through France on our way to Italy. Will you bear me company?" "With all my heart," said Martin. "It is said that Venice is fit only for its nobility, but that strangers meet with a very good reception, if they have a good deal of money. I have none of it. You have, therefore. I will follow you all over the world." "But do you believe," said Candide, "that the earth was originally a sea, as we find it asserted in that large book belonging to the captain?" "No, I do not believe a word of it," said Martin, "any more than I do of the ravings which have been published lately." "But for what end, then, has this world been formed?" said Candide. "To plague us to death," answered Martin. "Are you not greatly surprised," continued Candide, "at the love which these 2 girls of the Oreillons had for those monkeys, of which I have already told you?" "Not at all," said Martin. "I do not see that the passion was strange. I have seen so many extraordinary things that I have ceased to be surprised." "Do you believe," said Candide, "that men have always massacred each other as they do today? That they have always been liars, cheats, traitors, ingrates, brigands, idiots, thieves, scoundrels, gluttons, drunkards, misers, envious, ambitious, bloody-minded, calumniators, debauchees, fanatics, hypocrites, and fools?" "Do you believe," said Martin, "that hawks have always eaten pigeons when they have found them?" "Yes, without doubt," said Candide. "Well, then," said Martin, "if hawks have always had the same character, why should you imagine that men have changed theirs?" "Oh," said Candide, "there is a vast deal of difference, for free will." And reasoning thus, they arrived at Bordeaux. Chapter 22. What happened in France to Candide and Martin. Candide stayed in Bordeaux no longer than was necessary for the selling of a few of the pebbles of El Dorado, and for hiring a good chaise to hold 2 passengers, for he could not travel without his philosopher Martin. He was only vexed at parting with his sheep, which he left to the Bordeaux Academy of Sciences, who set as a subject for that year's prize to find why this sheep's wool was red. And the prize was awarded to a learned man of the north, who demonstrated by A plus B minus C divided by Z that the sheep must be red and die of the rot. Meanwhile, all the travellers whom Candide met in the inns along his route said to him, "We go to Paris." This general eagerness at length gave him, too, a desire to see this capital, and it was not so very great a detour from the road to Venice. He entered Paris by the suburb of Saint-Marceau, and fancied that he was in the dirtiest village of Westphalia. Scarcely was Candide arrived at his inn, that he found himself attacked by a slight illness caused by fatigue. As he had had a very large diamond on his finger, and the people of the inn had taken notice of a prodigiously heavy box among his baggage, there were 2 physicians to attend him, though he had never sent for them, and 2 devotees who warmed his broths. "I remember," Martin said, "also to have been sick at Paris in my first voyage. I was very poor, thus I had neither friends, devotees, nor doctors, and I recovered." However, what with physic and bleeding, Candide's illness became serious. A parson of the neighborhood came with great meekness to ask for a bill for the other world payable to the bearer. Candide would do nothing for him, but the devotees assured him it was the new fashion. He answered that he was not a man of fashion. Martin wished to throw the priest out of the window. The priest swore that they would not bury Candide. Martin swore that he would bury the priest if he continued to be troublesome. The quarrel grew heated. Martin took him by the shoulders and roughly turned him out of doors, which occasioned great scandal and a lawsuit. Candide got well again, and during his convalescence he had very good company to sup with him. They played high. Candide wondered why it was that the ace never came to him, but Martin was not at all astonished. Among those who did him the honors of the town was a little Abbé of Périgord, one of those busybodies who are ever alert, officious, forward, fawning, and complacent, who watch for strangers in their passage through the capital, tell them the scandalous history of the town, and offer them pleasure at all prices. He first took Candide and Martin to La Comédie, where they played a new tragedy. Candide happened to be seated near some of the fashionable wits. This did not prevent his shedding tears at the well-acted scenes. One of these critics at his side said to him between the acts, "Your tears are misplaced. That is a shocking actress. The actor who plays her is yet worse, and the play is still worse than the actors. The author does not know a word of Arabic, yet the scene is in Arabia. Moreover, he is a man that does not believe in innate ideas, and I will bring you tomorrow 20 pamphlets written against him." "How many dramas have you in France, sir?" said Candide to the Abbé. 5 or 6,000. "What a number!" said Candide. "How many good?" 15 or 16, replied the other. "What a number!" said Martin. Candide was very pleased with an actress who played Queen Elizabeth in a somewhat insipid tragedy, sometimes acted. "That actress," said he to Martin, "pleases me much. She has a likeness to Miss Cunegonde. I should be very glad to wait upon her." The Perigordian Abbé offered to introduce him. Candide, brought up in Germany, asked what was the etiquette, and how they treated queens of England in France. "It is necessary to make distinctions," said the Abbé. "In the provinces one takes them to the inn. In Paris, one respects them when they are beautiful and throws them on the highway when they are dead." "Queens on the highway?" said Candide. "Yes, truly," said Martin. "The Abbé is right. I was in Paris when Miss Monime passed, as the saying is, from this life to the other. She was refused what people call the honneurs of sepulture, that is to say, of rotting with all the beggars of the neighborhood in an ugly cemetery. She was interred all alone by her company at the corner of the Rue de Bourgogne, which ought to trouble her much, for she thought nobly. That was very uncivil, said Candide. What would you have? Said Martin. These people are made thus. Imagine all contradictions, all possible incompatibilities. You will find them in the government, in the law courts, in the churches, in the public shows of this droll nation. Is it true that they always laugh in Paris? Said Candide. Yes, said the Abbé, but it means nothing, for they complain of everything with great fits of laughter. They even do the most detestable things while laughing. Who, said Candide, is that great pig who spoke so ill of the piece at which I wept, and of the actress who gave me so much pleasure? He has a bad character, answered the Abbé, who gains his livelihood by saying evil of all plays and of all books. He hates whatever succeeds, as the eunuchs hate those who enjoy. He is one of the serpents of literature who nourish themselves on dirt and spite. He is a folliculaire. What is a folliculaire? Said Candide. It is, said the Abbé, a pamphleteer, a frowne. Thus Candide, Martin, and the Perigordian conversed on the staircase while watching everyone go out after the performance. Although I am eager to see Cunegonde again, said Candide, I should like to sup with Miss Clairon, for she appears to me admirable. The Abbé was not the man to approach Miss Clairon, who only saw good company. She is engaged for this evening, he said, but I shall have the honor to take you to the house of a lady of quality, and there you will know Paris as if you had lived in it for years. Candide, who was naturally curious, let himself be taken to this lady's house, at the end of the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. The company was occupied in playing faro. A dozen melancholy punters held each in his hand a little pack of cards. A bad record of his misfortunes. Profound silence reigned. Pallor was on the faces of the punters, anxiety on that of the banker, and the hostess, sitting near the unpitying banker, noticed with lynx eyes all the doubled and other increased stakes, as each player dog's-eared his cards. She made them turn down the edges again with severe but polite attention. She showed no vexation for fear of losing her customers. The lady insisted on being called the Marchioness of Parole-Lignac. Her daughter, aged 15, was among the punters, and notified with a covert glance the cheatings of the poor people who tried to repair the cruelties of fate. The Perigordian Abbé, Candide, and Martin entered. No one rose. No one saluted them. No one looked at them. All were profoundly occupied with their cards. The Baroness of Thunder-ten-Tronckh was more polite, said Candide. However, the Abbé whispered to the Marchioness, who half rose, honored Candide with a gracious smile, and Martin with a condescending nod. She gave a seat and a pack of cards to Candide, who lost 50,000 francs in 2 deals, after which they supped very gaily, and everyone was astonished that Candide was not moved by his loss. The servants said among themselves in the language of servants, "Some English lord is here this evening." The supper passed at first like most Parisian suppers, in silence, followed by a noise of words which could not be distinguished, then with pleasantries of which were most insipid, with false news, with bad reasoning, a little politics, and much evil speaking. They also discussed new books. "Have you seen," said the Perigordian Abbé, "the romance of Monsieur Gauchat, Doctor of Divinity?" "Yes," answered one of the guests, "but I have not been able to finish it. We have a crowd of silly writings, but altogether do not approach the impertinence of Gauchat, Doctor of Divinity. I am so satiated with the great number of detestable books with which we are inundated that I am reduced to panting at faro." "On the mélange vache de can troubler. What do you say of that?" said the Abbé. "Ah," said the Marchioness of Parolignac, "the wearisome mortal! How curiously he repeats to you all that the world knows! How heavily he discusses that which is not worth the trouble of lightly remarking upon! How without wit he appropriates the wit of others! How spoils he what he steals! How he disgusts me! But he will disgust me no longer. It is enough to have read a few of the Archdeacon's pages." There was at table a wise man of taste, who supported the Marchioness. They spoke afterwards of tragedies. The lady asked why there were tragedies which were sometimes played, and which could not be read. The man of taste explained very well how a piece could have some interest and have almost no merit. He proved in few words that it was not enough to introduce one or two of those situations which one finds in all romances, and which always seduce the spectator, but that it was necessary to be new, without being odd, often sublime, and always natural, to know the human heart and to make it speak, to be a great poet without allowing any person in the piece to appear to be a poet, to know language perfectly, to speak it with purity, with continuous harmony, and without rhythm ever taking anything from sense. "Whoever," added he, "does not observe all these rules can produce one or two tragedies applauded at the theatre, but he will never be counted in the ranks of good writers. There are very few good tragedies. Some ideals in dialogue, well written and well rhymed. Others, political reasonings which lull to sleep, or amplifications which repel. Others, demoniac dreams in barbarous style, interrupted in sequence with long apostrophes to the gods, because they do not know how to speak to men, with false maxims, with bombastic commonplaces." Candide listened with attention to this discourse, and conceived a great idea of the speaker, and as the Marchioness had taken care to place him beside her, he leaned towards her, and took the liberty of asking who was the man who had spoken so well. "Ah, he is a scholar," said the lady, "who does not play, whom the Abbé sometimes brings to supper. He is perfectly at home among tragedies and books, and he has written a tragedy which was his, and a book of which nothing has ever been seen outside his bookseller's shop, excepting the copy which he dedicated to me." "The great man," said Candide. "He is another Pangloss." Then, turning towards him, he said, "Sir, you think doubtless that all is for the best in the moral and physical world, and that nothing could be otherwise than it is?" "Aye, sir," answered the scholar, "I know nothing of all that. I find that all goes awry with me, that no one knows either what is his rank, nor what is his condition, what he does, nor what he ought to do, and that except supper, which is always gay, and where there appears to be enough concord, all the rest of the time is passed in impertinent quarrels. Jeanne exist against Molinist, Parliament against the Church, men of letters against men of letters, courtesans against courtesans, financiers against the people, wives against husbands, relatives against relatives, etc. Turn a war. I have seen the worst, Candide replied, but a wise man, who since has had the misfortune to be hanged, taught me that all is marvellously well. These are but the shadows on a beautiful picture.
Your hangman mocked the world, said Martin. The shadows are horrible blots.
They are men who make the blots, said Candide, and they cannot be dispensed with.
It is not their fault, then,
said Martin. Most of the punters, who understood nothing of this language, drank, and Martin reasoned with the scholar, and Candide related some of his adventures to his hostess. After supper, the Marchioness took Candide into her boudoir, and made him sit upon a sofa. "Ah, well," she said to him, "you love desperately Miss Cunegonde of Zondertenstronk?" "Yes, madame," answered Candide. The Marchioness replied to him with a tender smile. "You answer me like a young man from Westphalia. A Frenchman would have said it is true that I have loved Miss Cunegonde. But seeing you, madame, I think I no longer love her." "Alas, madame," said Candide, "I will answer as you wish." "Your passion for her," said the Marchioness, "commenced by picking up her handkerchief. I wish that you would pick up my garter." "With all my heart," said Candide. And he picked it up. "But I wish that you would put it on," said the lady. And Candide put it on. "You see," said she, "you are a foreigner. I sometimes make my Parisian lovers languish for 15 days, but I give myself to you the first night because one must do the honors of one's country to a young man from Westphalia." The lady, having perceived 2 enormous diamonds upon the hands of the young foreigner, praised him with such good faith that from Candide's fingers they passed to her own. Candide, returning with the Perigordian Abbé, felt some remorse in having been unfaithful to Miss Cunegonde. The Abbé sympathized in his trouble. He had had but a light part of the 50,000 francs lost at play, and of the value of the 2 brilliants, half given, half extorted. His design was to profit as much as he could by the advantages which the acquaintance of Candide could procure for him. He spoke much of Cunegonde, and Candide told him that he should ask forgiveness of that beautiful one for his infidelity when he should see her in Venice. The Abbé redoubled his politeness and attentions, and took a tender interest in all that Candide said, in all that he did, in all that he wished to do. "And so, sir, you have a rendezvous at Venice?" "Yes, Monsieur Abbé," answered Candide. "It is absolutely necessary that I go to meet Miss Cunegonde." And then the pleasure of talking of that which he loved induced him to relate, according to his custom, part of his adventures with the fair Westphalian. "I believe," said the Abbé, "that Miss Cunegonde has a great deal of wit, and that she writes charming letters." "I have never received any from her," said Candide, "for being repelled from the castle on her account, I had not an opportunity for writing to her. Soon after that I heard she was dead. Then I found her alive, then I lost her again, and last of all I sent an express to her 2,500 leagues from here, and I wait for an answer." The Abbé listened attentively, and seemed to be in a brown study. He soon took his leave of the two foreigners after a most tender embrace. The following day Candide received, on awaking, a letter couched in these terms: "My very dear love, for 8 days I have been ill in this town, and I learn that you are here. I would fly to your arms if I could but move. I was informed of your passage at Bordeaux, where I left faithful Cacambo and the old woman, who are to follow me very soon. The governor of Buenos Aires has taken all, but there remains to me your heart. Come, your presence will either give me life or kill me with pleasure." This charming, this unhoped-for letter transported Candide with an inexpressible joy, and the illness of his dear Cunegonde overwhelmed him with grief. Divided between those two passions, he took his gold and his diamonds and hurried away, with Martin, to the hotel where Miss Cunegonde was lodged. He entered her room trembling, his heart palpitating, his voice sobbing. He wished to open the curtains of the bed and asked for a light. "Take care what you do," said the servant maid. "The light hurts her." And she immediately drew the curtain again. "My dear Cunegonde," said Candide, weeping, "how are you? If you cannot see me, at least speak to me." "She cannot speak," said the maid. The lady then put a plump hand out from the bed, and Candide bathed it with his tears, and afterwards filled it with diamonds, leaving a bag of gold upon the easy-chair. In the midst of these transports, in came an officer, followed by the abbé and a file of soldiers. "There," said he, "are the two suspected foreigners," and at the same time he ordered them to be seized and carried to prison. "Travelers are not treated thus in El Dorado," said Candide.
"I am more Manichaean now than ever,"
said Martin. "But pray, sir, where are you going to carry us?" said Candide.
"To dungeon,"
answered the officer. Martin, having recovered himself a little, judged that the lady who acted the part of Cunegonde was a cheat, that the Perigodian abbé was a knave who had imposed upon the honest simplicity of Candide, and that the officer was another knave whom they might easily silence. Candide, advised by Martin and impatient to see the real Cunegonde, rather than expose himself before a court of justice, proposed to the officer to give him 3 small diamonds, each worth about 3,000 pistoles. "Ah, sir," said the man with the ivory baton, "had you committed all the imaginable crimes, you would be to me the most honest man in the world. 3 diamonds, each worth 3,000 pistoles? Sir, instead of carrying you to jail, I would lose my life to serve you. There are orders for arresting all foreigners, but leave it to me. I have a brother at Dieppe in Normandy. I'll conduct you thither, and if you have a diamond to give him, he will take as much care of you as I would." "And why," said Candide, "should all foreigners be arrested?" "It is," the Perigordian abbé then made answer, "because a poor beggar of the country of Atrebati heard some foolish things said. This induced him to commit a parricide, not such as that of 1610 in the month of May, but such as that of 1594 in the month of December, and such as others which have committed in other years and other months by other poor devils who had heard nonsense spoken." The officer then explained what the abbé meant. "The monsters!" cried Candide. "What horrors among a people who dance and sing! Is there no way of getting quickly out of this country where monkeys provoke tigers? I have seen no bears in my country, but men I have beheld nowhere except in El Dorado. In the name of God, sir, conduct me to Venice, where I am to await Miss Cunegonde." "I can conduct you no further than Lower Normandy," said the officer. Immediately he ordered his irons to be struck off, acknowledged himself mistaken, sent away his men, set out with Candide and Martin for Dieppe, and left them in the care of his brother. There was then a small Dutch ship in the harbour, the Norman, who by the virtue of 3 more diamonds had become the most subservient of men. Put Candide and his attendants on board a vessel that was just ready to set sail for Portsmouth, in England. This was not the way to Venice, but Candide thought he had made his way out of hell and reckoned that he would soon have an opportunity for resuming his journey. Chapter 23. Candide and Martin touched upon the coast of England and what they saw there. Pangloss, Pangloss, Martin, Martin, and my dear Cunegonde, what sort of a world is this? Said Candide on board the Dutch ship.
Something very foolish and abominable, said Martin.
You know England? Are they as foolish there as in France?
It is another kind of folly, said Martin. You know what these 2 nations are at war for a few acres of snow in Canada, and that they spend over this beautiful war much more than Canada is worth? To tell you exactly whether there are more people fit to send to a madhouse in one country than the other is what my imperfect intelligence will not permit. I only know in general that the people we are going to see are very atrabilious.
Talking thus, they arrived at Portsmouth. The coast was lined with crowds of people whose eyes were fixed on a fine man kneeling, with his eyes bandaged, on board one of the men of war in the harbour. 4 soldiers stood opposite to this man. Each of them fired 3 balls at his head, with all the calmness in the world, and the whole assembly went away, very well satisfied. What is all this? Said Candide, and what demon is it that exercises his empire in this country? He then asked who was that fine man who had been killed with so much ceremony. They answered he was an admiral. And why kill this admiral? It is because he did not kill a sufficient number of men himself. He gave battle to a French admiral, and it has been proved he was not near enough to him. But, replied Candide, the French admiral was as far from the English admiral. There's no doubt of it, but in this country it is found good from time to time to kill one admiral to encourage the others. Candide was so shocked and bewildered by what he saw and heard that he would not set foot on shore, and he made a bargain with the Dutch skipper, were he even to rob him like Suriname captain, to conduct him without delay to Venice. The skipper was ready in 2 days. They coasted France, they passed in sight of Lisbon, and Candide trembled. They passed through the straits and entered the Mediterranean. At last they landed at Venice. God be praised, said Candide, embracing Martin. It is here that I shall see again my beautiful Cunegonde. I trust Cacambo as myself. All is well, all will be well, all goes as well as possible. Chapter 24 of Paquette and Friar Giroflée. Upon their arrival at Venice, Candide went to search for Cacambo at every inn and coffee-house, and among all the ladies of pleasure, but to no purpose. He sent every day to inquire on all the ships that came in, but there was no news of Cacambo. What? Said he to Martin. I have had time to voyage from Suriname to Bordeaux, to go from Bordeaux to Paris, from Paris to Dieppe, from Dieppe to Portsmouth, to coast along Portugal and Spain, to cross the whole Mediterranean, to spend some months, and yet the beautiful Cunegonde has not arrived. Instead of her, I have only met a Parisian wench and a Perigordian abbé. Cunegonde is dead. without doubt, and there is nothing for me but to die. Alas, how much better it would have been for me to have remained in the paradise of El Dorado than to come back to this cursed Europe. You are in the right, my dear Martin. All is misery and illusion. He fell into a deep melancholy, and neither went to see the opera nor any of the other diversions of the carnival. Nay, he was proof against the temptations of all the ladies. "You are in truth very simple," said Martin to him, "if you imagine that a mongrel valet who has 5 or 6 millions in his pocket will go to the other end of the world to seek your mistress and bring her to you to Venice. If he find her, he will keep her to himself. If he do not find her, he will get another. I advise you to forget your valet Cacambo and your mistress Cunegonde." Martin was not consoling. Candide's melancholy increased, and Martin continued to prove to him that there was very little virtue or happiness upon earth, except perhaps in El Dorado, where nobody could gain admittance. While they were disputing on this important subject and waiting for Cunegonde, Candide saw a young Theatin friar in St. Mark's Piazza, holding a girl on his arm. The Theatin looked fresh-colored, plump, and vigorous. His eyes were sparkling, his air assured, his look lofty, and his step bold. The girl was very pretty, and sang. She looked amorously at her Theatin, and from time to time pinched his fat cheeks. "At least you will allow me," said Candide to Martin, "that these two are happy. Hitherto I have met with none but unfortunate people in the whole habitable globe, except in El Dorado. But as to this pair, I would venture to lay a wager that they are very happy." "I lay you they are not," said Martin. "We need only ask them to dine with us," said Candide, "and you will see whether I am mistaken." Immediately he accosted them, presented his compliments, and invited them to his inn to eat some macaroni with Lombard partridges and caviar, and to drink some Montepulciano, Lacrimae Christi, Cyprus, and Samos wine. The girl blushed. The Theatin accepted the invitation, and she followed him, casting her eyes on Candide with confusion and surprise, and dropping a few tears. No sooner had she set foot in Candide's apartment than she cried out, "Ah, Mr. Candide does not know Paquette again?" Candide had not viewed her as yet with attention, his thoughts being entirely taken up with Cunegonde, but recollecting her as she spoke, "Alas," said he, "my poor child, it is you who reduced Dr. Pangloss to the beautiful condition in which I saw him?" "Alas, it was I, sir, indeed," answered Paquette. "I see you have heard all. I have been informed of the frightful disasters that befell the family of Lady Baroness and the fair Cunegonde. I swear to you that my fate has been scarcely less sad. I was very innocent when you knew me. A grey friar, who was my confessor, easily seduced me. The consequences were terrible. I was obliged to quit the castle some time after the Baron had sent you away with kicks on the backside. If a famous surgeon had not taken compassion on me, I should have died. For some time I was the surgeon's mistress, merely out of gratitude. His wife, who was mad with jealousy, beat me every day unmercifully. She was a fury. The surgeon was one of the ugliest men, and I the most wretched of women, to be continually beaten for a man I did not love. You know, sir, what a dangerous thing it is for an ill-natured woman to be married to a doctor. Incensed at the behavior of his wife, he one day gave her so effectual a remedy to cure her of a slight cold that she died 2 hours after, in most horrid convulsions. The wife's relations prosecuted the husband. He took flight, and I was thrown into jail. My innocence could not have saved me if I had not been good-looking. The judge set me free on condition that he succeeded the surgeon. I was soon supplanted by a rival, turned out of doors quite destitute, and obliged to continue this abominable trade which appears so pleasant to you men, while to us women it is the utmost abyss of misery. I have come to exercise the profession at Venice. Ah, sir, if you could only imagine what it is to be obliged to caress indifferently an old merchant, a lawyer, a monk, a gondolier, an abbé, to be exposed to abuse and insults, to be often reduced to borrowing a petticoat, only to go and have it raised by a disagreeable man, to be robbed by one of what one has earned from another, to be subject to the extortions of the officers of justice, and to have in prospect only a frightful old age, a hospital, and a dunghill. You would conclude that I am one of the most unhappy creatures in the world. Paquette thus opened her heart to honest Candide in the presence of Martin, who said to his friend, "You see that already I have won half the wager." Friar Giroflée stayed in the dining room and drank a glass or two of wine while he was waiting for dinner. "But," said Candide to Paquette, "you looked so gay and content when I met you. You sang and you behaved so lovingly to the Theatin that you seem to me as happy as you pretend to now be the reverse." "Oh, yes," answered Paquette. "This is one of the miseries of the trade. Yesterday I was robbed and beaten by an officer, yet today I must put on good humour to please a friar." Candide wanted no more convincing. He owned that Martin was in the right. They sat down to table with Paquette and the Theatin, and the repast was entertaining, and towards the end they conversed with all confidence. "Father," said Candide to the friar, "you appear to me to enjoy a state that all the world might envy. The flower of health shines in your face. Your expression makes plain your happiness. You have a very pretty girl for your recreation, and you seem well satisfied with your state as a Theatin." "My faith, sir," said Friar Giroflée, "I wish that all the Theatins were at the bottom of the sea. I have been tempted 100 times to set fire to the convent and go and become a Turk. My parents forced me at the age of 15 to put on this detestable habit, to increase the fortune of a cursed eldest brother, whom God confound, jealousy, discord, and fury dwell in the convent. It is true I have preached a few bad sermons that have brought me a little money, of which the prior stole half, while the rest serves to maintain my girls. But when I return at night to the monastery, I am ready to dash my head against the walls of the dormitory, and all my fellows are in the same case." Martin turned towards Candide with his usual coolness. "Well," said he, "have I not won the whole wager?" Candide gave 2,000 piastres to Paquette and 1,000 to Friar Giroflée. "I'll answer for it," said he, "that with this they will be happy." "I do not believe it at all," said Martin. "You will, perhaps, with these piastres, only render them the more unhappy." "Let that be as it may," said Candide, "but one thing consoles me. I see that we often meet with those whom we expected never to see more, so that perhaps, as I have found my red sheep and Paquette, it may well be that I shall also find Cunegonde." "I wish," said Martin, "she may one day make you very happy, but I doubt it very much." "You are very hard of belief," said Candide. "I have lived," said Martin. "You see those gondoliers," said Candide. "Are they not perpetually singing?"
You do not see them, said Martin, at home with their wives and brats. The Doge has his troubles, the gondoliers have theirs. It is true that, all things considered, the life of a gondolier is preferable to that of a Doge. But I believe the difference to be so trifling that it is not worth the trouble of examining.
People talk, said Candide, of the senator Pococurante, who lives in that fine palace on the Brenta, where he entertains foreigners in the politest manner. They pretend that this man has never felt any uneasiness.
I should be glad to see such a rarity, said Martin.
Candide immediately sent to ask the Lord Pococurante permission to wait upon him the next day. Chapter 25. The Visit to Lord Pococurante, a noble Venetian. Candide and Martin went in a gondola on the Brenta and arrived at the palace of the noble Signor Pococurante. The gardens, laid out with taste, were adorned with fine marble statues. The palace was beautifully built. The master of the house was a man of 60 and very rich. He received the two travelers with polite indifference, which put Candide a little out of countenance, but was not at all disagreeable to Martin. First, two pretty girls, very neatly dressed, served them with chocolate, which was frothed exceedingly well. Candide could not refrain from commending their beauty, grace, and address.
They are good enough creatures, said the senator. I make them lie with me sometimes, for I am very tired of the ladies of the town, of their coquetries, of their jealousies, of their quarrels, of their humours, of their pettinesses, of their prides, of their follies, and of their sonnets. Which one must make? I have a maid for them. But after all, these two girls begin to weary me.
After breakfast, Candide, walking into a long gallery, was surprised by the beautiful pictures. He asked by what master were the two first.
They are by Raphael, said the senator. I bought them at a great price out of vanity some years ago. They are said to be of the finest things in Italy, but they do not please me at all. The colors are too dark. The figures are not sufficiently rounded, nor in good relief. The draperies in no way resemble stuffs. In a word, whatever may be said, I do not find a true imitation of nature. I only care for a picture when I think I see nature itself, and there are none of this sort. I have a great many pictures, but I prize them very little.
While they were waiting for dinner, Pococurante ordered a concert. Candide found the music delicious.
This noise, said the senator, may amuse one for half an hour, but if it were to last longer, it would grow tiresome to everybody. Though they does not own it, music today is only the art of executing difficult things, and that which is only difficult cannot please long. Perhaps I should be fonder of the opera if they had not found the secret of making it a monster, which shocks me. Let who will go to see bad tragedies set to music, where the scenes are contrived for no other end than to introduce 2 or 3 songs ridiculously out of place, to show off an actress's voice. Let who will or who can die away with pleasure at the sight of a eunuch quavering the role of Caesar or of Cato and strutting awkwardly upon the stage. For my part, I have long since renounced those paltry entertainments, which constitute the glory of modern Italy, and are purchased so dearly by sovereigns.
Candide disputed the point a little, but with discretion. Martin was entirely of the senator's opinion. They sat down to table, and after an excellent dinner, they went into the library. Candide, seeing a Homer magnificently bound, commended the virtuoso on his good taste. "There," said he, "is a book that was once the delight of the great Pangloss, the best philosopher in Germany."
"It is not mine,"
answered Pococurante coolly.
"They used to, at one time, make me believe that I took a pleasure in reading him. But that continual repetition of battles so extremely like one another, those gods that are always active without doing anything decisive, that Helen, who is the cause of the war, and who yet scarcely appears in the piece, that Troy, so long besieged without being taken, all of these together caused me great weariness. I have sometimes asked learned men whether they were not as weary as I of that work. Those who are sincere own to me that the poem made them fall asleep. Yet it was necessary to have it in their library as a monument of antiquity, or like those rusty medals which are no longer of use in commerce."
"But your Excellency does not think thus of Virgil?" said Candide.
"I grant," said the senator, "that the second, fourth, and sixth books of his Aeneid are excellent. But as for his pious Aeneas, his strong Clotos, his friend Achates, his little Ascanius, his silly King Latinus, his bourgeois Amata, his insipid Lavinia, I think there can be nothing more flat and disagreeable. I prefer Tasso a good deal, or even the soporific tales of Ariosto."
"May I presume to ask you, sir," said Candide, "whether you do not receive a great deal of pleasure from reading Horace?"
"There are maxims in this writer," answered Pococurante, "from which a man of the world may reap a great benefit, and being written in an energetic verse, they are more easily impressed upon the memory. But I care little for his journey to Brundusium, and his account of a bad dinner, or of his low quarrel between Rupilius, whose words he says were full of poisonous filth, and another whose language was imbued with vinegar. I have read with much distaste his indelicate verses against old women and witches, nor do I see any merit in telling his friends Maecenas that if he will but rank him in the choir of lyric poets, his lofty head shall touch the stars. Fools admire everything in an author of reputation. For my part, I read only to please myself. I like only that which serves my purpose."
Candide, having been educated never to judge for himself, was surprised at what he heard. Martin found there was a good deal of reason in Pococurrante's remarks. "Oh, here is Cicero," said Candide. "Here is the great man whom I fancy you are never tired of reading."
"I never read him," replied the Venetian. "What is it to me whether he pleads for Babirius or Cluentius? I try causes enough for myself. But his philosophical works seem to me better. But when I found that he doubted of everything, I concluded that I knew as much as he, and that I had no need of a guide to learn ignorance." "Ha! There are 80 volumes of the Academy of Sciences," cried Martin. "Perhaps there is something valuable in this collection."
There might be," said Pococurrante, "if only one of those rakers of rubbish had shown how to make pins. But in all of these volumes there is nothing but chimerical systems, and not a single useful thing." "And what dramatic works I see here," said Candide, "in Italian, Spanish, and French."
"Yes," replied the senator, "there are 3,000, and not 3,000 of them good for anything. As to those collections of sermons, which altogether are not worth a single page of Seneca, and those huge volumes of theology, you may well imagine that neither I nor anyone else ever opens them."
Martin saw some shelves filled with English books.
"I have a notion," said he, "that a republican must be greatly pleased with most of these books, which are written with a spirit of freedom."
"Yes," answered Pococurrante, "it is noble to write as one thinks. This is the privilege of humanity. In all of Italy we write only what we do not think. Those who inhabit the country of the Caesars and the Antoniuses dare not acquire a single idea without the permission of a Dominican friar. I should be pleased with the liberty which inspires the English genius, if passion and party did not corrupt all that is estimable in this precious liberty."
Candide, observing a Milton, asked whether he did not look upon this author as a great man.
"Who?" said Pococurrante. "That barbarian who writes a long commentary in 10 books of harsh verse on the first chapter of Genesis, that coarse imitator of the Greeks who disfigures the creation, and who, while Moses represents the eternal producing the world by a word, makes the Messiah take a great pair of compasses from the armory of heaven to circumscribe his work? How can I have any esteem for a writer who has spoiled Tasso's hell, and the devil who transforms Lucifer sometimes into a toad, and other times into a pygmy, who makes him repeat the same things 100 times, who makes him dispute on theology, who, by a serious imitation of Ariosto's comic invention of firearms, represents the devil's cannonading in heaven. Neither I nor any man in Italy could take pleasure in those melancholy extravagances, and the marriage of a sin and death, and the snakes brought forth by sin, are enough to turn the stomach of anyone with the least taste. And his long description of a pest house is good only for a grave digger.
This obscure, whimsical, and disagreeable poem was despised upon its first publication, and I only treat it now as it was treated in its own country by contemporaries. For the matter of that, I say what I think, and I care very little whether others think as I do.
Candide was grieved at this speech, for he had had a respect for Homer and was fond of Milton. "Alas," said he softly to Martin, "I am afraid that this man holds our German poets in very great contempt."
"There would not be much harm in that,"
said Martin. "Oh, what a superior man!" said Candide, below his breath. "What a great genius is this Pococurante! Nothing can please him." After their survey of the library, they went down into the garden, where Candide praised its several beauties.
"I know of nothing in so bad a taste," said the master. "All you see here is a mere trifling. After tomorrow I will have it planted with a nobler design."
"Well," said Candide to Martin, when they had taken their leave, "you will agree that this is the happiest of mortals, for he is above everything he possesses."
"But do you not see," answered Martin, "that he is disgusted with all he possesses? Plato observed a long while ago that those stomachs are not the best that reject all sorts of food."
"But is there not a pleasure," said Candide, "in criticizing everything, in pointing out faults where others see nothing but beauties?"
"That is to say," replied Martin, "that there is some pleasure in having no pleasure."
"Well, well," said Candide, "I find that I shall be the only happy man when I am blessed with the sight of my dear Cunegonde."
"It is always well to hope,"
said Martin. However, the days and the weeks passed. Cacambo did not come, and Candide was so overwhelmed with grief that he did not even reflect that Paquette and Friar Giroflée did not return to thank him.